Team apps, are you in good hands? Hey, what's up you guys? So for today's video, I wanted to ask you guys a question. This is probably aimed more at the competitive crowd, but anybody can chip in. So the question today is, what makes these low tier decks low tier? So this is an interesting question because, as you guys know in Yu-Gi-Oh, it's just sort of a commonly accepted rule that there is a tier list. There are decks that are just that have more potential and are just more or less better than other decks. And I guess the tier list right now is something along the lines of like Shaddoll, Teller Knight, you know, those decks. And they're in what most people would call tier 1. And then you've got tier 2, which is those decks that can compete. They can beat tier 1 decks if they're played well, but overall they're just not really consistent enough or maybe not powerful enough to win as often as the tier 1 decks. You could say that Mermails or Fire Fists are in tier 2. You can also say that some decks like maybe X Sabers are like tier 2, or even like Battery Men. Fuck if I know. So yeah, there are loads of decks in tier 2. A lot of people say that tier 2 is probably the biggest tier in terms of just how many decks there are. So that's tier 2. Then there's like tier 3, which is decks that they're viable enough to be called a deck, but usually they're more of the fun decks. They're maybe the aliens, the counter fairies, just the decks that like they're fun and they're usually kind of gimmicky. They can work if you play them well, but they're usually just gonna kind of get run over by meta in the long run. And then of course you got like the trash tier, I guess. And there's also the like tier 0, which is above tier 1, which is like that one deck that's like uber dominating a format, but we haven't had one of those since like, I guess Dragon Ruler Spellbook. Anyway, so what do you guys think makes these decks tier 1, or rather, what does a deck need to be tier 1? What these tier 2 and tier 3 decks lack that makes them tier 1? And this is kind of a long debated argument. It's not an easy question to answer. Like, you know, some people would argue that in order to be tier 1, your deck has to be consistent. And a lot of decks in the top tier are very consistent. They do have ways to search out all their cards. Historically, that's kind of been one of the defining factors. You know, when Mermails were top tier, everything searched everything. You know, wind-ups, they had things like Factory and you know, you could run 3 of so many good cards that searched other cards, Injector Centipede, Future Fusion. Like, there are consistency cards. Other people would say that these top tier decks need to be fast. You have to set up like in your first turn and just get the ball rolling quickly. And I'd say that that's probably a factor. That's definitely something you need. Some people say that you need power plays. This is the one that I think I agree with most, and I think it separates the tier 1 from the tier 2 from the tier 3. Is that these tier 1 decks, the top tier decks, their plays are more meaningful. Their plays are what I call power plays. They make more pluses, they put more pressure on the opponent, they give you more board control than tier 2 or 3 decks. A good example would probably be just some of the opening plays of decks like Dino Rabbit when it was top tier. When you summon the rabbit, sacked it off, got your dinosaurs, made Lagia, and had like, you know, Solemn Warning and Lance and Valor in hand. That was like a power play that was done super quickly. Like it was quick, it was efficient, it didn't use a lot of resources, and it put you in a powerful position against your opponent. And I think that that's a defining factor of a top tier deck. A lot of tier 2 decks, a good example maybe being like, I don't know, Psychics or something right now. You don't get those power plays, or when you make them, they're not as efficient. You have to use resources, you have to set them up. Whereas these top tier decks can make these powerful plays really early on. I guess for Shaddolls, that would be the Summoning the Wind and the Construct, backed by your Shaddoll pluses. So I'd say that power play is probably one of the bigger factors. Some people might say it's draw power. That's possible. Some people might say that it's outs. a lot of top tier decks have outs to certain situations that lower tier decks sometimes have to struggle against. A lot of the top tier decks do have easy outs to things like hands, or they aren't as heavily affected by Fiendish Chain and Breakthrough Skill as lower tier decks are. And that is something that I guess I should talk about. It feels like a lot of low tier decks are limited by cards like Fiendish Chain, by cards like Breakthrough Skill. In the past, it was like Maxi and Valor, where these tier 2 decks just couldn't compete because they were so easily shut down by a Maxi or a Valor. Things like, Harpies that could have been tier 1 because they can make those powerful plays. With Channeler, you can make Chidoris and Draco Sacks super simply, but Maxi, Valor, Fiendish, Breakthrough, they just hurt Harpies so much more than they hurt something like Mermails in their prime, or something like, Shaddoll's right now. Teller Knights. It feels like there's a lot of things that can hold back a tier 2 deck. Is it the need to set up? Is it the need for just something that's more consistent? I play X-Sabers, and I always feel like with X-Sabers, they can beat anything, but they have to take time to be able to. They have to set their Immerse Blaze, they have to set their Dark Souls. The Dark Souls and Immerse Blaze have to go to the grave. That takes time, it can be ruined. A lot of tier 2 decks suffer from that, but the question today for you guys really is, what do you feel separates tier 1 from tier 2, from even like tier 3, and I guess tier trash? But like, what do these low tier decks need? What do they need to compete, would you guys say? Would you guys say it's, not having the draw power, not having the speed, not having the consistency, not having the power plays, not having the outs? What is it? What separates the tiers in you here? What does a deck need to be top tier? I'd like to hear what you guys have to say, because there's not like a right or wrong answer. Although one that I like, that I thought of, and some people agree with me on, is I think that to be a top tier deck, you just need Konami's favor, which is true in today's game. Pretty much Konami dictates what is and isn't top tier, so you have to be one of the decks Konami liked. They liked Teller Knights and Shaddoll's. They wanted them to be top tier. So they gave them the support they needed. Whereas the other decks, they didn't. Malice Everest. So, yeah, and things like that. So, that's what I want to know. What do you guys think low tier decks need to become high tier decks? And, just for fun, what would you guys say is currently tier 1? What decks are currently in tier 2 and what decks are currently in tier 3? And I know that I guess tier 2 and 3 can get a bit lengthy, so I mainly want to know what your tier 1 is. What is the current tier list in your opinion? And what would it take to change that? So leave those in the comments blocks, and I will catch you guys later. But first, I have to remind you, the YugiTube Awards are coming up. YugiTuber's Choice Awards, not the other thing. Nominations start in October, voting starts in November, and it's hosted by me and Tom from Team D-Boys. Just a friendly reminder. Also, I'm expecting to be at YCS Dallas in October, so I'd love to meet you guys there. And like my Facebook page, follow my Twitter page, follow my Instagram, because I do talk to people in there. Believe it or not, the people who talk to me in there will know. I'm not lying. Alright, that's all for the video. Please leave your thoughts and comments. Like, subscribe, share with friends. See ya.